Jeffrey sat quietly, staring at the picture in his hands, an old photo of himself from before everything changed. His eyes lingered on it like he was trying to recognize that version of himself. The door creaked open. Peter stepped in, already moving toward the bed to help change Jeffrey and straighten the sheets. "You okay?" Peter asked gently. Jeffrey let out a small breath. "I will be once I get in my chair." Peter nodded, working carefully. "Come on, man, let's at least get you some fresh air. You've been stuck in here ever since everything came out about your bio family." Jeffrey's expression tightened. "Easy for you to say, you know yours." Peter paused for a second, then shook his head. "Yeah, and trust me, that's not always a good thing. They're all messed up, Jeff. Ben turned a disabled man into a woman without consent. Vin got that man killed. Pat and Tom locked up after stealing money from you," he sighed. "I never even got to meet my real dad because of all that." Jeffrey looked up at him, surprised. "My point is," Peter continued, softer now, "the grass isn't always greener on the other side." There was a long silence. Then Jeffrey gave a small nod. "Yeah, okay." Peter gave him a faint smile. "Now let's get you up." As Peter helped him into his chair, Jeffrey exhaled, some of the weight finally lifting. "Tom," Jeffrey said quietly. Peter glanced at him. "Thanks, I needed that." Ron stepped into the room, looking between them. "Peter, Matt's on his way." Peter frowned. "For what?" Ron shrugged slightly. "To meet you." Jeffrey let out a quiet chuckle from his chair. "Wow, look at that. You just got done saying the grass isn't always greener, now you're about to see the other side yourself." Peter shot him a look. "Oh, shut up." Jeffrey smirked, the tension in the room easing just a little. Ron shook his head with a faint smile. "You too, I swear." Peter crossed his arms, still trying to process it. "So, he's really coming?" Ron nodded. "Yeah, he is." Peter exhaled slowly, the weight of it settling in. "All right," he said, "let him come." Jeffrey leaned back in his chair, watching Peter carefully. This time it wasn't just his story anymore. Jeffrey smirked, trying to lighten the mood. "Hey, you're a strong 32-year-old lawyer, you got this." Peter shot back instantly, raising an eyebrow. "And you're 28, still in diapers." Jeffrey shrugged, not missing a beat. "Yeah, maybe my bio family won't be crazy." Ron stepped in, already shaking his head. "Guys, you are grown men, start acting like it." There was a brief pause. Then Jeffrey and Peter glanced at each other. And both tried and failed not to laugh. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stared, two strangers who weren't supposed to be strangers. Matt broke the silence first, his voice careful. "Peter." Peter swallowed. "Yeah." Another pause, longer this time. Matt nodded slightly, like he was confirming something to himself. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually want to meet." Peter leaned against the doorframe, still studying him. "I wasn't sure either." From inside the room, Jeffrey watched, barely breathing, while Ron stood quietly behind him. Matt shifted his weight. "Can I come in?" Peter hesitated, then stepped aside. "Yeah," he said, "come in." Matt walked past him, and as he did, Peter closed the door slowly behind them. The room felt different now. Heavier. Like something long buried had finally made its way to the surface. Jeffrey looked between them, then back at Peter. This wasn't just a meeting. This was the beginning of answers, whether they were ready for them or not. Ron stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Jeffrey, give them the room." Jeffrey turned to him, hesitant. "Dad." Ron didn't budge. Jeffrey arm-tod. That was enough. Jeffrey sighed, clearly not happy about it. He looked back at Peter, then at Matt. "Fine, but you trust this guy." Ron raised an eyebrow. "You want TV later." Jeffrey rolled his eyes. All right, I'm going." He turned his chair toward the door, pausing for a second as he looked back at Peter. "You got this," he said quietly. Peter gave a small nod. Jeffrey then rolled out, Ron following behind him. As they stepped into the hallway, Ron gently pulled the door closed, leaving Peter and Matt alone. Silence filled the room. Matt shifted slightly, taking it all in. "So this is where you've been." Peter crossed his arms, leaning back a little. "Yeah." Another pause. Then Peter looked at him directly. "Let's not waste time," he said. "Why are you really here?" Matt exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding it in for years. Because I should have been here a long time ago. The air between them tightened. This wasn't going to be easy. Peter crossed his arms, his guard going right back up. My brother's skeptical of you, he said bluntly, after everything with Tom, Pat, and what happened at the group home. Matt nodded slowly, taking that in without pushing back. Yeah, he said, I get it, he's just looking out for you. Peter studied him for a moment like he was trying to figure out if that answer was real or just the right thing to say. He's been through a lot, Peter added. Matt's voice softened, sounds like you both have. That hung in the air. Peter didn't respond right away. Because for the first time, it didn't feel like Matt was defending himself. It felt like he actually understood. Peter crossed his arms, his guard going right back up. My brother's skeptical of you, he said bluntly, after everything with Tom, Pat, and what happened at the group home. Matt nodded slowly, taking that in without pushing back. Yeah, he said, I get it, he's just looking out for you. Peter studied him for a moment like he was trying to figure out if that answer was real or just the right thing to say. He's been through a lot, Peter added. Matt's voice softened, sounds like you both have. That hung in the air. Peter didn't respond right away. Because for the first time, it didn't feel like Matt was defending himself. It felt like he actually understood. Peter's composure finally began to slip. Why are you here? Why now? He demanded. Pat only told us last week. We just got back from Jeffrey's hearing with Haven Cross, the place that tracks down biological families who gave up their kids. He's already overwhelmed. He took a step closer, his voice tightening. So, why now? Matt didn't rush his answer. Because Pat told me she finally told you, he said quietly. Peter shook his head, frustration building. I was at your house every summer, every single summer. Why didn't you say anything then? Matt swallowed, the weight of it showing. Because it was an open adoption, he explained. Sue and Ron, they wanted to be the ones to tell you when you turned 18. Peter let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, well, that never happened. Matt's eyes dropped. I know. Peter's voice tightened, emotion slipping through. Mom found out she had cancer. Silence. Matt looked back up, his face shifting, regret, guilt, all of it hitting at once. I didn't know it would happen like that, he said. Peter's jaw clenched. It always happens like that, doesn't it? Another heavy pause filled the room. For the first time, neither of them had a defense left. Just the truth sitting between them. Out in the hallway, Jeffrey leaned closer to the door, trying to catch every word. His face tightened. Why is he telling him my stuff? Ron immediately stepped in, gently but firmly pulling him back. Stop eavesdropping on them. Jeffrey frowned, still looking at the door. But Dad. Ron shook his head. No, this isn't about you right now, they need space to figure this out. Jeffrey sat back in his chair, clearly frustrated. I just don't trust him. Ron crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. You don't have to trust him yet. Jeffrey looked up, then why should Peter? Ron let out a slow breath. Because sometimes, people deserve the chance to explain themselves. Jeffrey didn't answer. He just stared at the closed door. Waiting. Inside the room, the tension had shifted, quieter but sharper. Peter stood near the window now, his back half turned, like he needed distance just to think. Matt stayed where he was, giving him space, but not leaving. You had years, Peter said, voice low but tight, years to say something. Matt exhaled slowly, and I thought I was doing the right thing by waiting. Peter turned sharply, for who, me or for you? That landed. Matt didn't dodge it. For you, he said, at least that's what I told myself. Peter let out a dry, humorless laugh. Yeah, that worked out great. Silence pressed in again. Matt stepped a little closer, careful. I didn't want to blow up your life. Peter's eyes snapped to him. You did, because that's exactly what this did. Matt nodded, accepting it. I can see that now. Peter shook his head, packing once. You don't get it. My whole life, everything I thought I knew, just flipped in a week. I know. No, you don't, Peter cut in, sharper now. You went back to your life. I didn't have that option. Matt stopped, letting that hit. I'm not here to take anything from you, he said quietly. I'm here because I already lost enough time. Peter stared at him, searching his face. Then say it, Peter said. Matt hesitated. Say what? The truth, Peter pushed, not the careful version, not the I thought I was doing the right thing version. His voice dropped. Why did you really stay away? That question hung heavier than anything before it. Matt looked down, jaw tightening. Then back up. Because I was scared, he admitted. Peter didn't move. Scared of what? He asked. Matt's voice was steadier now, even if it cost him. Scared that if I showed up, you wouldn't want anything to do with me. A long pause. Peter's expression shifted, but just slightly. Not softer. Not yet. But something cracked. Peter's restraint finally snapped. So let me get this straight, he said, voice shaking with anger. You had a son locked up, another one dead, and you and Pat still had all that time to tell me. Matt didn't answer. Peter stepped closer, eyes locked on him. Your wife told me 2.5 weeks ago, not you. He let that sit for a second, and now I'm supposed to just what, thank you, be okay with this. Matt's voice came out low, almost lost. I don't know. Peter shook his head, backing away like the air itself felt heavy. Yeah, he said bitterly, that's the problem, you don't know. Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't just tense. It was broken. Peter looked toward the door, then back at Matt, his expression hardening. I can't, he said quietly. A beat. Please just go. Matt stood there for a moment, like he wanted to say something, anything. But nothing came out. So instead he nodded once and turned toward the door. Matt stopped at the door, his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, Pat and I aren't the same. Peter didn't respond. Didn't even look at him. Matt waited a second longer, then realized there was nothing left to say. He opened the door and stepped out. In the hallway, Ron looked up as Matt came out, reading the situation instantly. Matt gave a small, respectful nod as he passed, then walked away without another word. Ron didn't follow him. Instead, he stepped into the room, moving toward Peter slowly. Hey, Ron said gently, reaching out to him. Peter pulled back. No, he said, shaking his head, I need to be alone right now. Ron stopped, respecting it, but not leaving just yet. Peter turned away, facing the window again, shoulders tight. I just need a minute. Ron studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, he said softly, I'm right outside. He stepped back, giving Peter the space he asked for, and quietly closed the door behind him. Inside, the room was silent again. But this time, it wasn't just tension. It was everything finally hitting at once. The hallway was quiet for a moment after Ron stepped out, but Jeffrey had already caught the shift in energy. He adjusted his chair slightly, eyes fixed on the closed door. Ron noticed him immediately. Jeffrey, stay put. Jeffrey frowned. I'm just gonna check on him. No, Ron said firmly, he asked to be alone. Jeffrey hesitated, gripping the wheels of his chair. He doesn't look okay. I know, Ron replied, softer now but still steady, but sometimes people need space more than help. Jeffrey looked down the hall, torn. A beat passed. Then he exhaled, this is stupid. Ron gave him a warning look, Jeffrey. But Jeffrey was already moving. I'm just checking, he muttered, I'm not doing anything. Ron started after him, but Jeffrey had already rolled up to the door. He stopped right outside it. For a second he just listened. Nothing. No yelling, no movement, just silence. Jeffrey raised his hand slowly and knocked, lightly at first. Peter, he called out, it's me. No answer. He looked back at Ron, who stood a few steps away, watching carefully but not intervening yet. Jeffrey leaned closer to the door again. Come on, just say something. Inside the room, Peter hadn't moved from the window. But he heard it. And for the first time since Matt left. His expression cracked just a little. Jeffrey stayed by the door, his voice softer now but steady. Peter, you know the people that gave you up for adoption, he said. Matt actually wants to be in your life. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I don't even know my bio family at all. I'd rather be mad at someone I can talk to, someone I can actually get answers from. A beat. Then be mad at people I'll never meet, people I can't even ask questions to. He leaned forward slightly in his chair, looking at the door like Peter was right on the other side. You're stuck between all this unknown stuff, Jeffrey continued, But at least Matt is here, that matters more than you think. Another pause. Then quieter. Think about it, bro. Inside the room, Peter didn't respond right away. But his shoulders lowered just slightly. And for the first time since everything started, he didn't shut the idea out completely. Peter stood just inside the room, back still half turned toward the door. Jeffrey's words had landed harder than he expected. For a moment, Peter didn't move. Then his breathing tightened. And the frustration, the pressure, the years of confusion, all of it finally broke through. His voice came out shaky first. Please. A pause. It cracked. Jeff, get away from my door. Jeffrey froze outside, instantly going quiet. Ron stepped forward in the hallway, ready to intervene, but Jeffrey lifted a hand slightly, stopping him. Inside the room, Peter turned away from the door fully now, wiping at his face fast like he was angry at himself for it. But it didn't stop. He leaned against the wall, sliding down a little, trying to steady his breath, but the emotions were already out. I can't, he started, then stopped. His voice dropped. I can't do this right now. Outside, Jeffrey stayed still, his expression softening. He didn't knock again. Didn't push. Just quietly said, all right, I'm here though. A long silence followed. Then Jeffrey slowly backed his chair away from the door, giving him the space he asked for. Ron exhaled quietly beside him. Inside the room, Peter stayed on the floor, finally letting himself feel everything he had been holding in. An hour later, the room was quieter. The storm had passed, but the weight of it still lingered in the air. Peter sat on the edge of the bed, eyes red, breathing steadier now. Jeffrey was still nearby, watching him carefully but not pushing. Peter finally broke the silence. He leaned forward and pulled Jeffrey into a tight hug. Thank you, bro, he said softly. Jeffrey blinked, surprised for a second, but then relaxed into it, returning the hug. Yeah, Jeffrey said quietly, I got you. Ron stood in the doorway, watching the moment without interrupting, letting it exist. Peter pulled back slowly, wiping his face once more, then turned toward Ron. Dad, he said, voice still rough but calmer now, can you send me Matt's number? Ron studied him for a moment, making sure. Peter nodded, I need to talk to him properly. A pause. Then Ron gave a small nod. Yeah, he said, I will. Jeffrey exhaled quietly beside them, the tension finally easing out of the room. For the first time that day, it didn't feel like everything was falling apart. It felt like something was finally starting to be faced. Peter stepped out of the room, phone in hand, heading down the hallway to make the call. The door clicked shut behind him. Ron stayed where he was for a moment, then turned to Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I'm proud of you, he said quietly, for helping Peter through that. Jeffrey shifted in his chair a little, processing it, then he shrugged. He's my brother, he said simply. He helps me with my daily care. A pause. I still don't trust Matt, Jeffrey added honestly, but Peter should at least talk to him. I just do like how all of this came up. Ron nodded, understanding him. That's fair. Jeffrey looked down the hall where Peter had gone. I just don't want him getting hurt again, he said more softly. Ron stepped closer, placing a steady hand on Jeffrey's shoulder. I know, he replied, that's why you spoke up, but now it's Peter's choice. Jeffrey let out a slow breath, leaning back slightly in his chair. Yeah, he muttered, I guess. The hallway fell quiet again, both of them waiting for what would come next. Jeffrey let out a slow breath, staring down the hallway. I'm happy for him, he said quietly, but I hate it, Tom's whole family. Ron didn't react with judgment, he just nodded once. I know, he said softly, that wasn't easy for you. Jeffrey shook his head immediately. It wasn't, he corrected, not even a little. A pause settled between them. Ron leaned against the wall, keeping his voice steady. You didn't have to step in back there, but you did. Jeffrey looked away, jaw tightening. I just didn't want him alone with all that in his head, he muttered, that's it. Ron studied him for a moment, then spoke gently. Still matters. Jeffrey didn't answer right away. Down the hall, the quiet felt different now, less tense, more uncertain, like everything had shifted but wasn't settled yet. Finally, Jeffrey exhaled. I just hope Peter doesn't regret any of this, he said. Ron gave a small nod. Yeah, he replied, me too. Ron exhaled slowly, his voice softening. Sorry that we can't do that for you, he said. Jeffrey looked down, then shook his head a little. The trip was for me, he replied quietly. It was Peter's turn, yeah, but I get what you mean. Ron frowned slightly. Jeffrey. But Jeffrey cut him off gently, not angry, just honest. I'm not mad, he said. I just hate how everything always turns into something else. A beat passed. He looked toward the closed door where Peter had gone to call Matt. I helped him, Jeffrey added. That's what I do, but it still feels like I'm stuck watching everything I don't get to have. Ron's expression softened even more. I hear you, he said. Jeffrey nodded once, swallowing the frustration. Yeah, he muttered, I know you do. Another quiet moment settled between them, heavy but calmer now. Ron stayed by his side, not fixing it, just being there. And for now, that was enough. Peter walked back down the hallway, phone still in his hand, his expression calmer but heavier. Ron looked up right away. What happened? Peter took a breath, trying to put it into words. He explained, Peter said slowly, you and Mom were trying to have kids and at the same time Pat got pregnant. Jeffrey looked up, listening closely. Peter continued, and right around then the group home had just opened. Everything was happening at once. Ron's face shifted, remembering. Peter glanced between them. He said it was complicated, like no one really knew what the right move was back then. A pause. Jeffrey frowned slightly. That doesn't make it okay. Peter nodded, I know. He looked down at his phone again. But it makes it make more sense. Ron stepped a little closer. And how do you feel about it? Peter didn't answer right away. He let out a slow breath. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I didn't hang up. That said more than anything else. Jeffrey leaned back slightly in his chair, watching him. Yeah, he said quietly, that's something. The three of them stood there in the hallway. Not fixed. Not resolved. But finally moving forward instead of stuck. Peter looked between them, still holding his phone. Matt said he didn't really have time back then, he explained. He had just started a law firm. Ron listened quietly. Peter continued, he said they saw an open adoption ad on TV and it made them think about you and Mom. Jeffrey frowned slightly, so that's when all this started. Peter nodded, yes, like everything lined up at once. The adoption, the group home opening, all of it. Ron let out a slow breath, remembering those days. It was a lot at the time, he admitted. Jeffrey crossed his arms a little, still feels like a lot now. Peter gave a small, tired nod. Yeah, it does. He looked down at his phone again, then back up. But at least now, I'm starting to hear the full story. The hallway went quiet again. Not as tense as before, but still carrying everything they were trying to process. Jeffrey looked at Peter for a moment, then nodded slightly. Hey, I'm happy you're getting answers, he said. I'm not trying to ruin your moment or anything. He hesitated. But I need some space right now. Peter didn't argue, he just nodded, understanding. No, I get it, he said, take your time. A small pause. Then Peter added softer. And thank you for earlier. Jeffrey gave a small shrug, like it wasn't a big deal, but it was. Anytime, he said. The moment sat between them, quiet, real. Not perfect, but honest. Ron watched Jeffrey roll away, then looked back at Peter. Peter, it's still fresh for him, he said quietly. Peter nodded, eyes following down the hallway. I know, we came back with no answers for him. Ron crossed his arms, thoughtful. He is happy for you, he said, not about the family you were born into, but for you. Peter let that sink in. Yeah, he said softly, I know he is. A pause. Peter looked back toward Ron. I just don't want this to feel like I'm moving forward and he's stuck. Ron shook his head gently. He's not stuck, he said, he's processing, there's a difference. Peter exhaled slowly. Then I'll give him time, he said. Ron gave a small nod. That's all you can do. The hallway fell quiet again. Not broken anymore. Just people learning how to move forward at different speeds. Will stepped into the hallway, looking confused. Why was Peter crying a bit ago, and now Jeffrey's crying in his room? Ron let out a slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck. Long story, he said. Will looked between him and the hallway, that bad. Ron gave a small nod. Yeah, but also necessary. Will frowned slightly, you gonna tell me? Ron glanced toward Jeffrey's door, then back at Will. I will, he said, just not right now. Will nodded, picking up on the weight of it. Got it. Another quiet moment passed. Ron looked down the hall again, one son trying to understand where he came from, and the other trying to deal with not knowing at all. Just give them both some space, Ron added. Will nodded, yeah, I can do that. Ron finally turned to Will, deciding not to brush it off this time. Will looked at him concerned. Ron, how are you dealing with all this? Ron let out a long breath, like he'd been holding it in. It's hard, he admitted. Sue and we were supposed to handle all of this together. His voice lowered a bit. But now it's just me. Will stayed quiet, letting him talk. Peter's got answers coming in, Ron continued, even if they're messy. A pause. But Jeffrey, I've got nothing for him. He shook his head slightly. Haven Cross keeps everything sealed. We went there, tried to find something, anything, and came back with nothing. Will frowned, that's rough. Ron nodded. Yeah, he said, one kid finally getting pieces of his story and the other one stuck with blanks. He looked down the hallway again. And I'm standing in the middle, trying to be enough for both. Will stepped a little closer. You are. Ron didn't respond right away. But he didn't disagree either. Will stood in Jeffrey's doorway, knocking lightly. Hey, can we talk? Jeffrey didn't look up right away. Why didn't you tell me about Haven Cross? Will stepped in slowly, not pushing too hard. Your mom told me about it, he said. After she adopted you, after she got all your medical information, she tried to find your birth parents. She wanted to know why they gave you up. Jeffrey's hands tightened slightly. Will continued. But the company kept blocking her. Every time she got close, they shut it down. A pause. When your mom and dad were trying to get answers, it was before they planned to tell you and Peter that you were adopted. Jeffrey looked up now. So why didn't she, he asked. Will's voice softened. Two reasons, he said. One, her cancer. That landed heavy. And two, she didn't want you to ever feel less than Peter. The room went quiet. Jeffrey swallowed, looking away again. She didn't see you any different, Will added gently, not for a second. Jeffrey didn't respond right away. But his expression shifted. Not fixed, but understanding something he hadn't before. Jeffrey's voice came out low. So I wasn't wanted. Will shook his head right away. No, that's not what this means. Jeffrey looked at him, eyes heavy. Then why does it feel that way? Will stepped a little closer, careful with his words. That's exactly why I didn't want you guys going there yet, he said. I knew it could hit like this without real answers. Jeffrey looked down, gripping his hands. It still feels like it, he admitted. Will nodded, not dismissing it. I get that, he said, but listen to me, the parents who raised you, your mom and dad, they wanted you, they chose you. A pause. They fought for you, Will added, even when they couldn't get the answers they were looking for. Jeffrey's expression softened just a little, but the hurt was still there. Will didn't try to fix it. He just stayed with him in it. Jeffrey looked back up, confusion mixing with everything else. Then why did Dad tell me this? Will took a breath. Your mom told him piece by piece, he explained, not all at once. Jeffrey frowned. Then how do you know more than Ron? Will hesitated for a second, then answered honestly. Because I was the social worker on your case, he said. When they adopted you, I was there for all of it. That landed. Jeffrey stared at him, trying to process it. So you knew everything. Will shook his head slightly. Not everything, he said, but more than most. A pause. I saw how much they wanted you, Will added, how hard they pushed to bring you home. Jeffrey's expression shifted again, still hurting but now mixed with something else. Something steadier. Jeffrey looked at Will, still trying to connect the pieces. Do you know my bio family? Will shook his head. No, he said honestly. Haven Cross only gave me the place and time to pick you up, that's it. Jeffrey frowned slightly. So Dad Ron stayed home with Peter. Will nodded. Yeah, he stayed back with your brother. Everything was already set up before you came home. Jeffrey went quiet for a moment, processing that. So it was all planned, he said under his breath. Will didn't rush to correct him, just clarified gently. Your adoption was planned, he said, not your life turning complicated after it. That distinction hung in the air. Jeffrey looked down, thinking harder now, not just feeling, but understanding how much of this had been out of anyone's control. Ron walked in slowly, taking in Jeffrey's expression before he even spoke. Jeffrey, I'm sorry, he said quietly, but I learned everything else right alongside you, I swear. Jeffrey looked up at him, eyes still heavy from everything he'd just heard. Ron stepped closer, keeping his voice steady but sincere. I didn't have some secret list of answers, he continued. Your mom knew more of the details than I did at the time, and even that came in pieces. Jeffrey stayed quiet. Ron shook his head slightly, frustrated, not at Jeffrey but at the situation. I was trying to hold everything together, he said. Peter, your mom, I was just trying to make sure nobody got hurt by the timing of it all. A pause. I wasn't hiding things from you to hurt you, Ron added. I was trying not to break everything at once. Jeffrey's jaw tightened, but his voice came out softer than before. It still feels like I was the last to know everything. Ron nodded immediately. I understand that, he said, and I'm sorry for how it feels. Silence settled between them. Not fixed, but a little more honest than before. Ron stayed where he was, not pushing, just there, letting Jeffrey decide what came next. Peter came back down the hallway, trying to keep things normal, but his face gave away that it was. Matt taking us for dinner, he said. Ron immediately shook his head, not a good time. Peter hesitated, then looked over at Jeffrey. I thought it might make you feel better, he added softly. Jeff, I mean it. Jeffrey didn't respond right away. His eyes were still heavy, everything from earlier sitting behind them. Peter waited a second longer, then lowered his gaze. I'll go ahead, he said quietly. And just like that, he turned and walked away. No argument. No follow-up. Just space. The hallway stayed still after he left. Ron looked at Jeffrey, then sighed gently. Hey, he said, you okay? Jeffrey didn't answer immediately. But this time he didn't look like he was holding everything in as tightly. Just tired. And thinking. Jeffrey's voice cracked as he finally let it all spill out. Dad, is there more lies in my life I don't know about? He said. Like, do I even really have cerebral palsy? Ron froze immediately. Jeffrey, no, he said firmly. No, that part is real. Jeffrey shook his head, frustrated and overwhelmed. You said things before and then a week later it was different. First it's one story, then another. I don't know what's real anymore. Ron stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen to me, he said carefully. Your condition is real, your needs are real, nothing about that is being hidden from you. Jeffrey's breathing was uneven now, emotions piling up. I just feel like everything keeps changing, he said. Every time I learn something it's like there's more behind it. Ron nodded slowly, not dismissing him. I understand why it feels that way, he said. A lot of things did get revealed late, a lot of things were handled badly. A pause. But your health, your care, that's not something that's been lied about, Ron added. That's something we've always had to manage together since day one. Jeffrey looked down, still shaken but listening. Ron softened his tone even more. I should have made the communication clearer for you, he admitted. I see that now. Silence settled between them again, but it was different this time. Less confusion in the air. More honesty trying to take its place. Jeffrey's voice rose, everything spilling out at once. Then why lie about everything else? His breathing sped up, hands shaking as the overwhelm hit all at once. Before it could spiral further, Peter stepped in quickly, grabbing Jeffrey's arm, not rough, just steady. Hey, calm down, Peter said, keeping his voice low but firm. Jeffrey tried to pull away, still caught in it. Ron moved closer, his tone grounding. You're overstimulated, he said gently. Just breathe, Jeffrey, slow it down. Peter stayed right there with him. Look at me, he said. You're okay, just breathe with me. Jeffrey's chest rose fast. Then again. Then slowly started to match Peter's pace. Inhale. Exhale. Ron didn't crowd him, just stayed close enough. No one's lying to you right now, Ron added softly. We're right here. The moment stretched. But little by little, the intensity started to come down. Not gone, but no longer exploding. Just heavy. And real. Ron's words came out shaky, like he hated even saying them. We thought you might hurt yourself. That landed hard. Peter's head snapped toward him. No, hold on, he said quickly, stepping in. Not like that, don't say it like that. He turned back to Jeffrey, softening immediately. Hey, Peter said, easing him back onto the bed carefully. We've got you. Ron and Will stepped in too, not crowding, just helping steady him, making sure he was safe. Peter kept his voice calm, controlled. Just sit for a second, you're overwhelmed, that's all, it's a lot hitting at once. Jeffrey's breathing was still uneven, but he wasn't fighting them now, just exhausted. Ron stayed close, regret all over his face. We weren't trying to lie to you, he said quietly. We were trying to protect you, maybe not the right way, but that's what it was. Peter glanced at Ron, then back at Jeffrey. You don't have to figure everything out right now, he added, just stay here with us. Will nodded from the side, you're not alone in this. The room went quiet again. But this time it wasn't breaking. It was holding. Jeffrey's voice broke completely. Why? The words kept coming, weaker each time, until they weren't words anymore. Just sobbing. Deep, uncontrollable, the kind that had been building for a long time. Peter didn't say anything this time. He just sat beside him, one hand steady on his shoulder, grounding, not forcing. Ron stood there for a second, like he wanted to fix it. Then realized he couldn't. So instead, he sat on the other side of the bed. I know, Ron said quietly, I know it feels like too much. Jeffrey didn't respond, he just cried harder. Will stayed nearby, giving space but not leaving. Peter leaned in slightly, voice low. You don't have to have the answers right now, he said, you're allowed to feel it. Ron nodded, his own voice heavy. We should have handled things better, he admitted, you deserved that. The room stayed like that for a while. No quick fixes. No big speeches. Just Jeffrey crying. And the people around him choosing to stay instead of stepping away. Later that night, Jeffrey was finally asleep, his breathing slow, the room quiet again. Ron stood near the doorway looking at him. He hasn't had a meltdown like that since he was 9, he said softly. Peter leaned against the wall, arms crossed, still watching his brother. He got it all out, Peter replied, now he's just exhausted. Ron nodded, but the weight was still there on his face. I hate that it got to that point, he admitted. Peter didn't look away from Jeffrey. Yeah, he said, but he needed to feel it. A pause. Ron glanced over, you did good with him. Peter shrugged a little, I just stayed. Ron gave a small nod. Sometimes that's the whole job. They both stood there a moment longer, watching Jeffrey sleep. Not fixed. Not finished. But calmer than before. And for now. That was enough. Jeffrey stirred, blinking awake, the room still dim and quiet from earlier. Ron was passing by the doorway when he heard him. Dad. Ron stopped and turned back immediately. Hey, you up? Jeffrey pushed himself up a little, still tired. I'm sorry, he said. I know you and Mom were trying to protect me, it was just too much. Ron walked in, sitting down beside him. Hey, he said gently, you don't have anything to be sorry for. Jeffrey shook his head slightly, I kinda lost it. Ron nodded, yeah you did. A small pause. But for a reason. Jeffrey looked down at his hands. I just felt like everything hit at once. Ron softened. I get that, he said, and I should have helped you through it better before it got there. Jeffrey glanced up, you didn't do it on purpose. No, Ron agreed, but that doesn't mean it didn't affect you. A quiet moment passed. Then Ron added. You handled it though, you came back from it. Jeffrey let out a small breath. Yes. Ron gave a faint smile. And you're not alone in any of this, not then, not now. Jeffrey nodded, calmer now than he'd been all day. Okay, he said quietly. Jeffrey looked down, voice quieter now. Earlier, I was trying not to bite myself. Ron's expression shifted immediately, concerned but controlled. I know, he said gently, Peter got to you and helped you onto the bed. Jeffrey nodded a little, remembering it. I didn't want to do it, he said, it just felt like too much. Ron stayed calm, not making it bigger, just meeting him where he was. I understand, he said. When everything piles up like that, your body just reacts. A pause. But you stopped, Ron added, and you let us help you. Jeffrey looked up slightly. Yes. Ron gave a small nod. That matters, he said, a lot. He leaned back just a bit, giving Jeffrey space but staying close. Next time it starts to feel like that, Ron continued, you don't have to fight it alone. Call me or Peter or Will before it gets that far. Jeffrey took that in, quieter now. Okay, he said. The room settled again. Not tense this time. Just steady. Jeffrey stared down at his hands, voice quiet but steady now. The last time I got like that was when I was 9. Ron nodded slowly, remembering. Yeah, he said softly, that was a lot for you back then too. Jeffrey let out a small breath. It felt the same, he admitted, like everything just hit all at once. Ron didn't rush to fix it. Too much at once, he agreed. A pause. But you're not that kid anymore, Ron added gently. You handled it differently this time. Jeffrey looked up slightly. Did I? Ron gave a small nod. You didn't let it take over the same way, he said. You tried to stop yourself, you let us help. That sat with Jeffrey for a moment. Yeah, he said quietly. Ron leaned back a bit, giving him space but staying close. And now we know what pushed you there, he added, so next time we can catch it earlier. Jeffrey nodded slowly. Okay. The room stayed calm. Not perfect, but more understood than before. Jeffrey looked away, voice low. I just hate that about myself. Ron didn't let that sit. Hey, stop, he said gently but firm. Don't turn one moment into who you are. Jeffrey didn't respond right away. Ron softened his tone. It was a moment, he said, a hard one. You got overwhelmed, that happens. Jeffrey shook his head slightly. Still feels like I lost control. Ron nodded. Yeah, you did for a bit. A pause. But you also got it back. That landed differently. You tried to stop yourself, Ron continued. You let Peter help, you came out of it. That's not failure, that's you fighting through it. Jeffrey's shoulders eased just a little. I don't want to be like that, he said quietly. Ron leaned in slightly. Then we learn from it, he said, not hate yourself for it. A small silence. Then Ron added softer. You're allowed to have breaking points, what matters is what you do after. Jeffrey nodded slowly. Okay. The weight wasn't gone. But it wasn't crushing him anymore either. Jeffrey shifted a little, still tired but calmer. Can I get out of the bed? Ron gave a small shake of his head, keeping his tone gentle. Let's just relax for a bit, he said. Watch some TV, hear your show on. Jeffrey looked at the screen, then back at him. What about food? Ron nodded. Peter's grabbing something now, he'll bring it in and help you eat right here. Jeffrey made a face. In bed. Just for tonight, Ron said. You've had a long day, no need to push it. A small pause. Jeffrey exhaled. All right. Ron adjusted the blanket slightly, making sure he was comfortable. Just rest, he said, we'll take care of the rest. Jeffrey settled back, eyes drifting toward the TV. Not fully okay yet. But finally starting to feel safe enough to slow down. Peter walked in, balancing the food. Bed rest, huh, he said with a smirk. I got you something decent at least. Jeffrey looked at him. Dad overruled me. Peter shrugged. All three of us did, me, Ron, and Will. Jeffrey narrowed his eyes. You're fired as my lawyer. Peter let out a short laugh. Yeah, too bad I don't take clients who don't listen. He handed him the food, then pointed. Now eat, I want to eat too. Jeffrey shook his head, but a small smile slipped through. Fine. The tension wasn't gone. But for the first time that day, it felt a little lighter. Peter glanced over at him, a little more serious now. Hey, really, you good? Jeffrey kept his eyes on the TV, where Tom and Jerry played, then nodded. Yeah, he said, I'm good. A small pause. It was hard today, Jeffrey admitted, but I made it through. Peter watched him for a second, then gave a quiet nod. Yeah, he said, you did. He leaned back, starting to eat. On the screen, chaos and cartoon laughter filled the room. And for once it helped. Not fixing everything, but giving them both a break from it. Peter set his food down for a second and looked over. "I'll get you comfortable for the night," he said. "After I help you get changed, I'll fix your pillows, put one between your legs so you're not stiff." Jeffrey nodded, slightly relaxed. "All right." Peter gave a small nod back. "Let me eat first, then I got you." Jeffrey smirked a little. "Don't take too long." Peter shook his head. "I won't." It wasn't a big moment, but it showed something steady between them. Routine, care, and trust. Ron looked over at Peter. "So when does Matt want us to come?" Peter paused, thinking for a second. "Friday," he said. "I forgot to mention it." Ron nodded slowly. "All of us." Peter glanced toward Jeffrey, then back at Ron. "Yeah," he said, "all four of us." A small pause settled in the room. Jeffrey kept his eyes on the TV, but he was definitely listening. Ron let out a quiet breath. "All right, we'll figure it out." Peter nodded. "Yeah," he said, "one step at a time." The plan was set. But how everyone felt about it, that was still unfolding. Jeffrey kept his eyes on the TV, but spoke up anyway. "Even though I don't like his kid or his wife, I'll try to be there." Peter looked over at him. "Jeffrey, you don't exactly have a packed schedule. You're going to Matt's." Jeffrey shot him a look. "Fine, but stop being an ass." Peter smirked a little. "I'm just making sure you don't back out." Jeffrey rolled his eyes. "I said I'd go." A small pause. Then Peter nodded. "All right, that's all I needed." It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. After finishing his food, Peter stood up and walked over. "All right," he said gently, "let's get you set for the night." Jeffrey nodded, already relaxed from the long day. Peter helped him get changed, moving carefully and routinely, nothing rushed, just making sure he was comfortable. "There we go," Peter said, adjusting things. He then grabbed a pillow and placed it between Jeffrey's knees, making sure his legs were supported. "That better?" Peter asked. Jeffrey shifted slightly, then nodded. "Yeah, that's good." Peter pulled the blanket up a bit. "All right," he said, "try to get some sleep." Jeffrey let out a small breath, eyes already getting heavy. "Night," he murmured. "Night," Peter replied. The room settled into quiet again. Not heavy this time, just calm.